Alright, so I've been asked a few times to do a little tutorial video, I guess, of just my process while doing iRacing paints. So hopefully this video will be a little insight of my process and just how I go about doing different paints. Right now I have a sprint car that we're working on. I'm inside Illustrator at the moment. So I'll give you guys a little rundown of just what I use. Right now I'm on a Mac. I prefer to design on a Mac, I guess. For me, it's just faster, and I like the file saving on Mac rather than a traditional desktop, I guess. And overall, I'm just more comfortable with it. I use it for school as well, so that kind of, helps me keep everything in one place. Throughout the video, I will explain what I am doing with everything and how I go about using different tools within the programs, but this isn't really just about how the tools work, more so just what I'm doing with them. So right now in Illustrator, I have the colors that we'll be using. I got black, a nice orange, where you can see the hex code there. I like to go more towards red because once you go any lighter than that, it kind of gets more yellow in the sim as well. So this orange I've used quite often. We have a nice gray. I usually like to go with 80% on the brightness. When it comes to gray, anything more than that, I kind of don't. It looks more white than gray, so I found that 80 is a nice mix, and then obviously we have white as well. So we're going to be using Jacob Allen's sprint car here as sort of a base and an idea of how the design is going to go. Not really copying it, but we'll use a similar style and make sure that we get the aggressiveness of this design using our colors. So what I'm going to start doing now is actually going over and making the custom number. We got a 7 and a 1 from srgfx.com. The number pack 16 is the one that I decided to go with. I kind of like this style of number, and when you start getting into skew and outlines, you can really make this style work as an aggressive font. Quite a few people like to use the appearance panel when they're doing outlines and such, which I can wrap my head around it, but I just don't prefer to use it. I prefer to use object path and offset path, and you'll see me use that throughout this number. And I also use the Pathfinder panel quite often. I have shortcut keys for different tools here, and the majority of the tools are the selection tool, the direct selection tool, and all of the pen tool options, as well as the shape builder tool, which you can find right here. All of these I have set for shortcut keys using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So it really just speeds up my process, and having all of them right there, and I don't even know what the normal keys are anymore. I've used them for so long. So we're going to jump in and start making this number more aggressive with different outlines and shading, and just see what we can do with it. My overall plan, I guess, for the design is to use black for the majority of the car, have orange accents, and then white will offset that, and most likely be similar to this in the way that the blue will probably be orange. But the white, I'm not too sure if that will stay white or if we will go to black or a gray. So we're just going to jump in now and start getting this number dialed in. I usually, as you can see in my layers panel here, I have the 7 and the 1 grouped, and when I do my outlines, it's when you do object path, offset path, you have this little panel here. You can offset the path by a certain amount of points. I like to use points when designing in Illustrator because it keeps everything simple. You're not using inches or pixels. So what we're going to do now is we're going to duplicate this group, and we're going to go with the one behind it and we're going to do object path, offset, not stroke, offset path. And I want to do a small outline to begin with, so I'm going to think around 4 points would be good. And what I'll usually do is how offset path works is it makes a new shape behind the original. So here we have the original number and then the outlined version of it. So I typically like to just select that, and in the Pathfinder you can use the merge or unite option and makes it one shape. I like to go with a smaller outline to begin with, and I'll probably make that orange, and then I'll do the same thing, duplicate behind. You can use Command, I'm on Mac, so Command or Control C, and then Command B puts it behind it. And then you just go again, object, path, offset path, and this time we want a thicker outline. So usually what I'll do is I'll either double the original number, so this is 4, it'll be 8, which doubles the thickness of the original outline. So I think I'll do that, and I'll make that black, and then we'll keep the number either gray or white. I'm thinking white, and then we'll do gray accents in the center of the number. From there, you can see in our layers we have the same original shape and then the outline shape. So we'll just go ahead and select the whole group, merge it, and then we'll put it back to the black color that we wanted. So now we're going to go in, we're going to do a negative offset to, this will be for the gray shadow shape. So usually I'll do the same as the small outline, and that will be 4 points, and then we'll give it this gray color, and we'll duplicate it. Actually, we'll go in and we'll get rid of the white outlines. So now we're just left with the gray shape, and we'll duplicate that, make it white, and then offset these to get that gray outline that we're looking for, or shadow. So I usually keep this the same. If I go up 4, then I'll go over 4 as well, until I get something that I like. So I think that's a good outline there. And so now what we'll do is we'll select the top white shape and the gray shadow that we want, and we'll use divide here to cut those shapes. And then in this layer group you can see all of the gray pieces here. So we'll select those, we'll group them, and then we'll come here and delete all the white bits that we don't need. So there is our number. So from here I'll take all these shapes, we'll group them, and then we'll duplicate this, so that way we can save it in case we need to adjust it later. So put that off to the side, and then we'll duplicate it again, because now we're going to go and we're going to skew the numbers and get it that aggressive look. So right now, how I usually like to skew my numbers back, this number here is skewed forward. I'm going to, I guess, see how they look. We're going to do object, transform, and shear. And I usually do between 15 and 20, so you can go ahead and preview what that'll look like. So that's 15. Let's see what 20 looks like. And I think 15 might be better. So we'll do the same to this number, but it's going to be a negative because it's for the other side of the car. So that'll skew it backwards, and this will be for the right side of the car, this will be the left side. So now that we have our numbers for each side of the car, what I like to do is I like to go in, and so for this will be the right side. I like to take the black outline, I'll duplicate it behind, and then I'll just thicken up that shadow and sort of give it that 3D look. And we'll do the same thing for the left side. Go and duplicate it and stick it out like that. So now we've got our base number, which has the outlines applied to it, no skew, in case we need to go back to the drawing board and use this to either fix the skew or try a different outline method if we find it doesn't work with our design. So now that we have our numbers, we can go ahead and jump over to Photoshop and get going on the actual background design. Alright, so now that we're in Photoshop, I'm actually using, I guess I'll talk about my Photoshop setup here. I have layers in a big panel because when doing paints in Photoshop, your layers are the most important part in making sure that you stay neat and organized and you know what shapes you're messing with at what time. So I'm using the Heatwave Design Smart Template here. It's phenomenal. I don't know how anyone could make sprint cars without this. I'll try and remember to put the link in the description, but if not, you can go to heatwavedesigns.net/downloads and they have a bunch there. So with these smart templates, you get a smart object layer. When you double click that, it brings you to a new document where you have all of the panels spliced together and lined up, so that way you don't have to guess about lining up panels, and that you can seamlessly do all of your designs this way, and then later on you'll see how it transfers over to the other template. So for me, I have taken the template and sort of organized it for my workflow and how I like to design my cars. So in the paintable area, you can see I have all the different sides masked off and ready to go for base graphics or sponsors or whatnot. So this is just how I like to do it, and this keeps me as neat as possible. I'll usually go back to Illustrator and I'll take my colors, so this way I'm not guessing or having to copy and paste. I can just eyedrop these colors in. So after I get my colors in there, I'll go in and I'll grab one of my numbers, whichever side I start on. So I think I'll start on the left side of the car, and we'll go back to Photoshop, and I'll find my left wing layer, and I have a blank layer that I can just paste in, and I make sure to keep it as a smart object, so if I ever need to mess with it, I can double click and it'll bring me straight to Illustrator, and we can play around. If I need to change colors, it'll be easier to do it that way. Now that we got the number in Photoshop, I'm gonna scale it down and make sure it's placed where I want it, and that would be at the top of the wing, and rotated, and make sure that everything lines up to the top of the wing and the back of the wing. And I usually like to stick it on that corner and then scale it down to fit this, I guess, third of the wing. And then from there we'll go ahead and change the base color by doing a color overlay. I usually like to go with a neutral gray, just so that way I can still see the wireframe and also my details in the number, because I have black outlines, so having a black base doesn't really show me where my number is. So from here, I like to just make sure that it's off the edges, but tucked in the corner as much as we can to leave room for the sponsor and not have to, I guess, suffer as much real estate on this wing for the number. So since this is layer masked, obviously everything is confined to that wing. So when you pull stuff in, you're not covering any other part of the car, and everything is just stuck in this box. So obviously this logo is too big for the space. But instead of scaling it down in the file, I'm going to go ahead and double click on the thumbnail, and it'll bring me into its own file where I can adjust it and actually make the changes that I need to make for this logo to fit in the area. So what I want to do is I want to unlock this layer, and I'm going to actually take the ellipse, and I want to copy or move this logo to the front of the text. And you can see I use the smart guides there just to hopefully line it up. I'm going to mess with it a little more here and make sure it is where I want it to be. Now that I have the sponsor, how I need it to fit in the space on the car, I'm going to go ahead and take this and copy it into this space because it wouldn't let me save it. So now I'm just going to delete the original, and I have this to work with. So we're going to go ahead and line it up to the top of the wing again. Make sure everything lines up and is placed where we want it to be placed. So I'm going to go ahead and plop that right around there, and then just move it up so that way it's aligned with the number. So now that we have our sponsor in place, we're going to go and try and mess with the colors of this so that way we can get the orange that we need. So usually what we'll do is we'll take the magic wand tool and select the background, delete it, then you'll be able to do a color overlay and get what you want. But this logo is being a little difficult. We're gonna have to go back to the drawing board and see how I can get this to be the orange color that we need. Alright, so that actually didn't take as long as I thought it was going to, but as you may have seen, I duplicated it just so I had the original in case I messed something up. So with the magic wand tool, you have a tolerance that you can see up here. Basically what that does is it gives you a range of how strict the magic wand will be depending on the pixels. And as you can see when you zoom in, there are some weird coloring going on around the letters, and my tolerance was just too low. As you can see, it was 10, now I moved it to 50, and it actually clipped to the edge of the letters quite well. So we're just gonna go and select everything. Actually, you can do select similar, and it'll pull anything that is of that color. So since what we selected was the black background, it's going to select all pixels that are black, and we can just go ahead and delete it, and we're left with our nice logo. So from here, we're just going to do a color overlay and select the orange color that we need, and then we're going to go ahead and save. Just a little Command S, and then it should update in our file. So now that we got our logo situated, I'm going to jump back to the original template here, and I have the contingency logos for the sprint cars, and the client is actually going to be using this paint for all 3 divisions. So I might have to clean this up a little bit, and I might take the dirt car off so that way it doesn't look weird in a 410 lobby or whatever. But I also have a layer here that has all of the contingencies from the wing on the side of the car as well. That's something that I like to do as well, because if you have sponsors to go on the bottom of the wings under the main sponsor here, then you really don't want the contingency sponsors there. But we don't have any sponsors to put down here, so I'm gonna fill that with the contingencies for now, and go from there. So we're gonna jump back to this and get going on the base graphic to try and not obviously copy, but get this sort of style here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the lasso tool. I usually use the polygonal one. The lasso one is just with a mouse, it's a little, hard to use. This one actually gives you straight lines, no curves. And if you hold shift, it gives you your common angles. So this is the one that I use most of the time whenever I'm doing straight lines. And if I need to do any curves, I'll use the pen tool, because you can click and pull and drag out shapes however you want them. So I'm going to go ahead and just play around with it and see what works for this number and this sponsor, and try and get a similar style to what we got going on here. So now that I've got my shape, I'm going to just experiment trying to get outlines or some sort of shape that I can use to get the orange incorporated. Typically what I'll do is I'll use the stroke inside the layer style, set it to the color we want, and play around with the size. The only thing about strokes in Photoshop is they always have a rounded edge, which I just hate. So I think what I'm going to do is not that, and we're just going to make a new layer below our shape and go back to our polygonal tool and just see what we can come up with to kind of match the style that we got going on. Alright, so I kind of like how this is looking. You could use pre-made shapes. I know a lot of good places out there like srgfx.com and Heatwave Designs all have custom shapes that you can use, but I like to make my own when I'm doing these cars, and this I think fits well for the style. It's not an exact copy of this, but it is similar with the outlines and having some of the gray shadow in with the design as well as the number. So I kind of like how this is looking, and I'm just going to clean up the sponsor a little bit and try and fix my spacing and make sure that it's not crowded, but it is still there. For right now, I think that's going to be good, and then what I'm going to do that I don't usually do yet, but I'm going to save this back to the original so that way I can see what it looks like with these sponsors on here. So as I was saying earlier, with these smart templates, all you gotta do is turn off any layers that aren't the paintable layer, and then you just hit Command S, and it should, obviously it's a big file so it's going to take a little while, but it should save back to this, and then you can see how it looks like on the door, or on the, not the door, but the side of the wing. And I do like how the bigger orange strip looks. It gets that color in there, and it's got the aggressive shape that we're looking for. So now that we have the shape that we're looking for, I might play around with the number a little bit and actually switch out the white for orange and just see how that goes, because if you zoom out you can see, obviously we know the number because we work with the number, but on track you might not be able to see that on a broadcast or any stream that you're watching it from, that you're watching the race from. So what we want to do is make sure that everything is readable, and to do that I'm going to mess with the color and see if it would be too much orange, making this white orange and just swapping that around. So we're going to do that now. Alright, so I'm not too sure about this yet. I'll probably wait to mess with this a little more when we get in the sim and we can actually see how it looks. But I'm going to leave this for now, so that way I know, because it's a lot easier to change the orange back to white than it is to do what I just did. So, like I said, I'm using a Mac, so one of the disadvantages is I can't just have iRacing open while I'm designing and load it up into the sim and check it. But usually I wait to do that on the PC anyway, so it just happens to be that this case I want that access at the moment, but it's alright. So now that we have our wing figured out, it's a good time to try and see what we can do with the sides of the car now. Usually I would try and match this shape to the side, but I'm going to go more simple shapes so that way we can get the sponsor on this side as clear as possible, because with sprint cars that is the almighty goal. So with my document set up, obviously with the layer masks, I'm gonna have to start working with this one, and what I will do is copy this Golden Ridge Boutique logo and paste it in this layer, so that way I can get it without having to mess with it too much. And we'll just line it up here and make sure that everything looks good and is lined up properly, because the worst thing is when your logos are turned just a little too much and they don't match with the body lines, and I prefer to keep everything cohesive and flowing nicely. So what I'll do is, I guess this line is usually my guide for how to turn my logo, and we'll go from there. Alright, so that took a little longer than it probably should have, but I decided to stick with almost like a flip of this, but not exactly. This time we have the logo in the white instead of the number. I think it looks pretty good, especially when you switch the logo to black. Not too sure what to do with this area down here. I will be putting my logo on this piece here, and then I think I'll be on the front wing as well. And then we'll put the number on the tail tank and his name in here. So for that, mostly that's it for the side of the car. I like to do all of that stuff inside Illustrator for anything that is in the style of the number will usually be in Illustrator. So I'll do his name, and I already have the numbers done and my logo's all set. So for the logos, we'll go back to Illustrator and start getting this stuff into the file and placing it where we need it. So the good thing with taking stuff from Illustrator is that it's all vector based, and while Photoshop is pixels and your quality can get really bad when it's really small, as you can see here, it's not the clearest. But the good thing about vectors is you can scale it back up and not lose any of that quality. So I can actually show how that looks. So now that this is just quickly, we'll rasterize this. So this is pixels now, and if we were to scale this back up, you can just see that loss of quality, which is why you always use smart objects. We'll just keep going along. I think what I'm going to do with the front wing is a very basic version of, maybe I'll just, we'll group this top wing graphics so that way we know what it is. And we will copy this and plop it in here and see how this looks at the front. So what I just want to make sure is that it's not a blank side piece of the wing, but there's something there that gives it a little more life and doesn't take away from whatever logo will be placed here. So now we're going to get my secondary logo on here and make sure everything looks the way we want it to look. And the good thing about these logos is the wireframe is really easy to figure out just how you need to rotate the logo and make sure that it is straight on this panel here. So because of the graphic, I'll be pushing it forward a little bit, and it will be a little smaller than it would if that graphic wasn't there, but that added detail really helps pull the piece together. So now that we get the front wing all dialed in, we'll get going on the tail tank, and then we can probably time lapse the rest of it because it is as simple as copy, paste. Obviously you'll have to flip it, but I figure that's all pretty self-explanatory. Now that I got the right side graphic all figured out, I'm going to go ahead and get the numbers on the tail tanks. What I usually do is I take the right side number and put it on the left tail tank, left side of the tail tank. This just makes it easier because then you're not worried about cutting off the number, and it fits the space better. So now that we got the numbers on the tail tanks, I'm going to move over to the top of the wing, and usually what I do is, so that way it's not just a blank wing, I'm going to take the graphics for the sides of the wings and I'll put them rotated on the roof of the top of the wing. This way you keep the theme and you're not having to worry about just leaving it blank. Okay, so now that I've got all the graphics laid out, I'm going to go back into Illustrator and get his name made up, so that way I can put it in this spot on the left side and then use the last name for the front of the wing. Right now we'll just save this back and see how it looks on the regular template and if anything is out of place or maybe wrong with the wings. So now that we're back in the regular template, you can just see how nice these smart templates are to work with and how we didn't have to splice anything. Alright, so now that we have everything laid out, I'm going to go into Illustrator, keep on this document, and just play around with some fonts and some styles and see if I can get what we're looking for and hold everything consistent. So now that we've got the design all finalized, I saved it back to the original template here, and that should be it for the design. I might add a few things once I bring it over to the sim computer, but for right now I'm gonna transfer over the file using my hard drive and go from there. Okay, so now that we're over on the sim computer here, I've got the file loaded up into Photoshop, and the only difference between my Mac setup and my PC setup is that I have actions set up here, so that way I can just load the car into the sim without having to go through the saving steps. It's all right here. So right now I have the 360 loaded up in here because that's just what I use for the paints. So I'll go ahead and play this, which will save out this file, and we can see it in the sim. So if I just reload this,
This should speed it up. There it is. So I do have cameras set up that I can easily go and view everything, but what I like to do is just take one of the pit cameras, and this will be my free roam camera. So as it sits right now, it looks pretty good. I don't see basically what you're looking for is any problems with lining stuff up, anything that looks out of place, whether the name on the wing isn't in the right spot or whatnot. I think right now the only thing I'd maybe think about doing is putting my logo in this area just to fill in that blank space, but other than that, at this point I would usually send screenshots to whoever is getting the wrap and then go from there. So once I do that and they approve the design or make whatever changes they want, I do a couple laps around and take my screenshots, and that's generally my process. So you can see the name there. It looks pretty good. The sponsors, the contingency sponsors, look nice on the wing. It really fills it in. The only thing I can really think of is something to go on the front wing here, or to move up the sponsor on the top of the wing, or make the number bigger. But at this point, you gotta watch, because he's gonna be using this in the 305s, and the 305s have that Fanatec banner at the top. So I don't really want to mess with it too much and maybe cut into that, but I think we can move this up just a little bit. Let's see how it looks. Maybe then we can make the number just a little bigger here. We'll save this. Load back into here. We'll load up into the sim. Reload the paint. And I think that might be a little better. Should fill in the space a little more. So I guess that's about it for my process. I hope you guys found it useful, and if you guys wanted to see anything more, just let me know. I've got I'll be doing a late model next, and then moving on to some truck paints. I might do another video on the late model because it is a different car, but I do have some time restraints, so I won't be able to do this often. But if you guys want to see anything, just let me know and I'll find some time to do it. Thanks, guys.